Notacon.
Hello. Thank you for attending. My name is Allison Smith, the voice of the Asterisk Open Source PBX. Please be sure that your tables and seat backs are in the upright position and that your seatbelt is securely fastened for liftoff. The telephone, as you know it, is about to go bye-bye. At this time, I would like to present Gregory Bainline, Asterisk developer and co-owner of N2Net. Thank you for calling, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Nothing. Actually, I had to buy her dinner. But that was about it. Bought her dinner at Astercon, but that was it. All right. All things being equal, I'm sure that you guys are going to have some questions. What I'm going to talk about here, and I'll just go into that in a little bit. This is contact information for me. I'm very open. Feel free to email me. Stop by our IRC channel, the Asterisk channel on irc.freenode.org. Be happy to chat with you. Channel Asterisk. There's also a bunch of other channels, some of which I won't mention. But feel free to personally ask me any questions or send me an email after this. A little bit about myself. I was born to a family of orangutans in the jungles of Borneo in 1971. And I've been using Linux for about, well, I don't know, 11 years now, is it? 12 years? I can't count very well. So since 1993. I'm the owner of N2Net in Cleveland, one of the owners of N2Net in Cleveland. And we provide mission-critical data service hosting for, pretty much everything. Internet services, telephony, voice over IP. It was an emerging market. And most of our stuff is Linux-based, as David was talking about earlier this morning. We use some of the same high availability clustering architecture that David uses to make sure that stuff just works. But also, just a comparison. This is me before I shave and after I shave. You had to ask, didn't you? I'm an Asterisk developer. Somehow I've stumbled into that community. I didn't really go in there looking to become a developer. But I was looking for something open source that I could devote time to, because in the wake of the Cleveland Linux Users Group and all the stuff that we've done here in the area, trying to get Linux out, I had sort of taken a couple of days off and decided I wanted to get into something new, and sort of fell into the Asterisk community. I have been branded as a bug marshal, although I probably break more stuff than I fix. And I probably am most well known and most well hated for the AstWind project, which is Asterisk on Windows, running on top of CoLinux. It is a bastardization of the utmost form you can never imagine. Yes, everybody asked me why, and the answer to that is very simply because Mark gave it to me, and I thought if he's focusing on this, then we got to help him. I'll take the responsibility for it. So if he's focused on this, nothing will ever get done. So I also semi-maintain, semi-unofficially, officially, not much that's official in the Asterisk community, but I semi-maintain the Asterisk RPMs in conjunction with several other people that have built on some of the work that I built on somebody else's work, and of course standing on the shoulders of giants. We have RPMs available for Red Hat 7.3 and 9.0, and also a variety of other platforms such as Fedora. I am a Red Hat sort of guy myself, although I do love Debian and anything Linux, but that's what it is. I use Asterisk every single day, both at home and at work. So I am able to talk about it from that perspective. My wife uses it, and if she doesn't know there's a difference, then I think we're going in the right direction. What I'd like to do is just start a little bit by talking about voice over IP, and I really don't want to offend anyone, because I would assume that you guys probably have a better knowledge of what voice over IP is probably than I do. So by order of hands, I just want to ask some questions. Who's using a voice over IP or IP telephony service at home right now over broadband? It's actually less than I thought. Okay. Who's planning on using something after this talk? Okay. Who hates the Vonage commercials? Okay, that's a universal. Okay, well, let's start with a little bit with talking about what VoIP is. Voice is very simply voice over IP. Means sending voice over the internet protocol. It's pretty simple. You know, anybody ever used IRC? Yeah, well, this is real-time communications. So continually samples audio every 20 milliseconds about. Each sample is then converted via codec into a digital format, sent across the wire as a digitized stream, reassembled at the other end, and output to your telephone device or your telephony adapter or your SIP phone, as it were. VoIP terminology, just to make things quick. Voice over IP. PSTN is what we call the Public Switch Telephone Network, or the Great Satan, as us in the ISP industry are fond of calling Ma Bell. Don't get me started on SBC, but if you want to hear somebody rant, I can rant with the best about SBC, I'll tell on the other RBox. Codec is very simply a digital signaling format or a way to convert audio from one format to the other. SIP stands for the Session Initiation Protocol, which is essentially the emerging standard of voice over IP that's being used. Personally, it's an overloaded piece of crap protocol, but that's my opinion. H.323 is irrelevant, so who cares? IX2 is the inter-asterisk exchange protocol, which can put about 3 times more data or 3 times as many voice calls across the same 1 megabit pipe as SIP can, which is why we refer to IX2 as being the first protocol that's not a pile of SIP. Why would you want to use VoIP? Does anybody have an answer to why you'd want to use VoIP? Okay.
Telephony can be cost effective. 2 people with VoIP technology on different sides of the world can have a conversation in real time without paying a dime for the call.
That's bullshit. Somebody always pays for the call. But very good. Yes, that is what the media is telling you. They're telling you right now that VoIP is cheap. VoIP is going to save you millions of dollars. You need to put VoIP into your enterprise. It's all hype. What you save in long distance minutes, you will tear up in bandwidth. You cannot put voice over IP across a crappy network. So if you have a satellite link with 800 milliseconds of latency, you are not going to use VoIP, no matter what kind of equipment they tell you. So beware of the marketing hype. VoIP does not necessarily save you a lot of money unless you have a good quality internet connection to use it with. So the increasing penetration of broadband, of course, provides us with lots of extra bandwidth. Aside from BitTorrent and some of the other things that you might use your 5 meg cable modem for, VoIP fits kind of nicely. In 128K, you can send a single call with pretty decent quality. 200K, you can send an awesome quality call. There's overhead for protocols. We won't get into the details of it, unless, of course, you want to do that. So there is always a catch. There's voice transmission delay, as I mentioned in my satellite discussion. There's call setup, call established, call termination issues. You know, the call that you're originating may not necessarily terminate wherever you want it to. Especially when you're working with some of the free networks. You have no idea where that stuff is going to end up, if it will end up somewhere at all. When sometimes you just get the privilege of listening to a busy signal. And we have to maintain backward compatibility with the old Ma Bell network because, let's face it, you're not going to give Grandma a Cisco 7960 phone. She just isn't going to get it. The biggest problem I have when I put voice over IP into a company is, well, how does it work? Well, it's a phone. You pick it up and you dial it. But I have to hit send, yes, or you program the dial rules. So people are trained to operate and have been trained to operate with a telephone the same way for 100 years, or about thereabouts. So it's hard to get people to change their behaviors and look at their phones as appliances rather than just as phones. Now, phones are able to, with SIP and with voice over IP technology and all sorts of wonderful things such as XML and web services, are able to deliver things like porn to your desktop. So, well, color too on the Cisco 7970s, and actually really good resolution porn. But that's the thing. I mean, these are now becoming integrated communication devices. I mean, they're not just phones anymore. So that's why when people see a SIP phone, they kind of get freaked out. Moving onward a little bit, There are a couple of telephony standards bodies. ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, they control telephony standards, and of course the Internet Engineering Task Force, which controls TCP/IP standards and that which relate to Internet Engineering Task Force business. And let's talk a little bit about the protocols. The two protocols, we'll talk about SIP and H.323. Even though H.323 is pretty much irrelevant, it's still out there, and it works very similar to the way that SIP works and some of the other protocols work. IX2 is a little different, doesn't work that way, but I can get into that a little bit later if people want to hear about it. Both groups agree on the basics for encoding and transmitting of audio. Audio is encoded using well-known standards such as pulse code modulation, PCM. Sure, everybody's heard that acronym. I have no idea what it means, but that's what it means. It is what it is. And then audio is transported using the real-time transfer protocol, RTP. And RTP messages are then encapsulated in UDP, and that is further encapsulated in an IP datagram for transmission. So if you're saying, wow, that's a lot of overhead, you're right. That's why it sometimes is better to just run a regular analog phone line if you have low bandwidth. UDP is used for transport. Does anybody know why? That's right. You can't really stop playback and wait for somebody's voice. Or it might get that effect. It does. Well, yeah. Yes, it does. But not with the new jitter buffer we put in. We have up to 15% packet loss before we hear that. 15% packet loss concealment. But that's cool stuff. Written by Bulgarian programmers, by the way, which is probably some violation of the DMCA or DCMA or whatever the hell that law is. But lower overhead audios must be played as live. There's two independent RTP sessions. This is why SIP sucks. You cannot run it through NAT very well. You have no idea what the source port and destination port are going to be, and it has to go back to the same place it came from, so getting SIP through NAT really, really sucks. There are ways to deal with it, such as STUN and some other very strange ways. I mean, if I told you that to run voice over IP, all of a sudden you had to open your firewall up for, say, 10,000 ports, you'd probably shoot me and tell me, go away. And I would tell you, okay, well, use IX2, which is UDP port 4569. It's one port. All your voice and data goes across that. And it's very, very teeny protocol. So one phone acts as a sender, the other acts as a receiver. Go ahead.
Speak or rant, if you will, about Skype, I'm thinking of specifically, which doesn't mean standardized protocol. That punches through that really well.
You know, I think they have an interesting way to deal about it. I don't know enough about the protocol because the code isn't open, and if it's not open, I really don't care about it. Skype in my world is irrelevant. Your businesses don't trust their infrastructure to Skype. Or if they do, they're not a really smart business. And they probably won't be around next year. So I think Skype has actually dealt with those problems in a very interesting way. But I don't know what that is. I don't have enough information to tell you definitively that they did X and Y differently. But I would assume that it's probably very similar to the way that IX2 or EX deals with that problem, which is a single UDP port. Could be wrong. This is my
I know you're
call
out
to
there.
the R-Box.
I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you.
This is the thing that AT&T fears the most. Open source telecommunications and PBX and all stuff that can make you communicate without having to pay a dime, although it's really not free. They love it because they run data across it, but they hate it because any kind of revenue in the industry related to long distance, local toll termination, additional features is going away. And Asterisk as an open source project is really leading the way for companies to take advantage of that. Companies, individuals, what have you. So that being the case, our box are very scared of Asterisk. Although, believe it or not, I can tell you quite frankly that there are several very large cable companies that are using Asterisk servers to serve lots of content to their cable modem internet telephony subscribers. And I won't say any names, but Cox. So That being the case, let's dive in a little bit to Asterisk.